Hello and welcome to Get Out the Bet, the show with all you need to know about betting on politics. Now, if you're already betting on politics, you're probably in Europe where it is legal in some places. It's not exactly legal in the US right now, but no reason we can't talk about it. My name is Melissa Caen, and I'll be the host of this show each week, and I'm here with our two Get Out the Bet experts who will be joining me each week. First up, we have political betting veteran Paul Krishnamurty.
Hi, Melissa. Great to be part of this very exciting new project. I think it's long overdue. Just to give a bit of background about myself. So I've been in the betting industry on all sides of it for 30 years as a professional gambler, as a analyst covering sports and particularly political betting for the UK betting exchange betfair.com, which is a site that we'll be talking a lot about during the series.
All right, thanks, Paul. We're so glad to have you with us. Also, we have our other political betting expert, Patrick Everson.
All right, thanks, Melissa and Paul. It's great to join you both. This is a really cool project to be involved with. I'm excited to see how it unfolds. Expert, I might defer a little bit, but I'm certainly somebody who is very intrigued by political betting. I've been in the sports betting space for many years. I'm currently the senior reporter for VegasInsider.com. But prior to that, I was about 22 years at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the newspaper here in Las Vegas. And what really got me a little more intrigued about the politics side of betting is the last 3 years. Most of my time in Las Vegas was on the sports desk, but the last 3 years I was the editorial writer there, and with that role comes a lot of politics and policy and so forth that you discuss and that you write about and so forth. And I just found kind of the political betting side of things to be fascinating. And particularly what I found fascinating is how enthusiastic folks in the United Kingdom are about betting on U.S. politics. So I'm sure that's something we'll discuss and that Paul can certainly elaborate more on.
That's right. We are definitely going to get into that. And actually, the first thing we're going to talk about here today is the legality of betting on politics. And we're not going to do this every single week, but we did want to start this initial show by talking about the subject. We think it's important. After that, we're going to move into some of the issues around odds on U.S. Senate races versus some of the polling and why these numbers might not always be the same. Finally, I want to tell you all, and we're going to remind you again throughout the show, that you should submit any questions you have to us. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can email us. You can also tweet at Patrick and at Paul as part of the podcast, and we will try to get to giving you information that you're requesting at the end of each show. But today, for our beginning show, I want to talk about where it's legal and whether it should be legal in the United States. So, of course, now, Patrick, you're in the U.S. What is the current state of the law around betting on politics in the U.S. when it comes to U.S. politics?
Right now, it's not available legally in any jurisdictions in the United States, and that's in the wake of the rapid expansion over the last 4+ years since the Supreme Court struck down PASPA and made it a states' rights issue to determine whether or not states would like to legalize sports betting in their states or jurisdictions, as the case may be with Washington, D.C., which did legalize sports betting. I believe, and I should have double-checked this beforehand, but I'm not sure if it was Virginia or West Virginia. I think it was West Virginia. Initially, as West Virginia went legal, I believe it was West Virginia, they actually wanted to include political betting with that. And they did to some degree. I think it was even sort of in some of the legislation or some of the proposed legislation. And it actually happened. I think there was at least one operator that immediately, when it looked like they could do it, they put some stuff up and they had to take it down pretty quickly. There was either some blowback or some change or probably a little bit of both. But right now in the United States, there are no jurisdictions in which political betting is legal.
Well, Pat, I'm very uncool, so forgive me for asking a dumb question here.
No, but
does political betting go on? I mean, for example, when it comes to sports, one of the arguments in favor of legalizing sports betting is, it's going on anyway. We might as well regulate it, collect some taxes. Is there widespread betting on politics in the U.S.? betting on U.S. politics in the U.S. That is happening under the radar, if you know or have heard something from somebody.
In what we'll
Okay.
call the global market. How's that?
Okay.
In the global market, if you will. Yes, there's no question this is happening. And look, it's not in the United States. I don't think it's as widespread as sports betting was in the offshore market, underground market, illegal market, however you wish to term it. But it's certainly going on. I know people who, and I'm sure Paul does too. Paul probably knows a ton of people who gamble on politics, but I know people here in the United States who do it. And there are some. There's one gentleman I've talked to for a couple of articles I've done over the years who does literally fly over to, once or twice he flies over to Great Britain and has his bets, and he makes his bets in a legal, regulated fashion with the British shops, whether it's the books or perhaps with Betfair, as Paul already alluded to. And that's something he's going to be talking about probably pretty extensively, I guess. But there are plenty of others who are not inclined to make a trip to the UK to do this. So they are finding other means by which to do this, if you get my meaning. And that's not to say that that's enough of a reason to legalize it. However, I don't think it's an argument against legalizing it either. I think it would be. I think it's another opportunity that's being missed out on in the same way that sports betting was. And I understand there, and we'll talk about this as we go on. There's lots of talk about integrity and everything. Well, there was a lot of that talk about sports too. And, I think we've all seen enough in politics. Melissa, certainly you're in your role, and Paul, with the extensive background you have in analyzing politics from a betting perspective, there's a lot of talk of, hey, it could corrupt elections or the integrity of politicians. Look, I think politicians do a fine job of screwing up their integrity. And if anything, I think betting might sharpen the market a little bit. I do think it tends to do that. I think it sharpens focus. It certainly sharpens odds makers' focus. And I can tell you, here in Las Vegas, I could rattle off a half a dozen names of people who are very well known in sports betting circles nationally, not just here in Las Vegas, but who are all for this. They would be all in on this, and they say the numbers would be off the charts, like literally 15 times what we see on a Super Bowl. If you could bet on just a presidential election here, we're talking about, if you could bet on a U.S. presidential election, the Super Bowl does huge numbers.
Well, Paul, has the integrity been affected in Europe? I mean, do you see in the UK, when you're allowed to bet, not just on the U.S., but also on your own elections, has there been any demonstrable issue there?
No, not really. I mean, to be honest, I find it quite an absurd argument because, for a start, of all of the reasons that the integrity of politics might be affected, betting really is way down the list when you've got billions and billions pouring into politics from all manner of sources, anonymous or not. The only things that I've ever seen in politics is this idea that a campaign might try and move the market to generate a better headline. But in reality, what happens when that has happened, in the few instances it happens, it blows up in their face because, the smart gamblers just take their money at the wrong prices. So, we had a candidate running for London Mayor who has no chance whatsoever, less than 1% in any poll. And someone tried to create the impression that he had a chance. And they were throwing money in, pushing his odds from, say, 1% up to 5% at a peak. But, as soon as it hit 5%, everybody who plays the market, who knows anything, just took their money. So
literally a pump and dump.
Yeah, and it generated really negative headlines for that person. So it really did backfire. Just to get into how this works, because I think this is quite important, the difference between a licensed and an unlicensed firm. I bet on sports prolifically every day. And, every sport has had this issue at some point raised about integrity, about match fixing. So let's take a sport that I know a lot about, cricket. Cricket is a global sport. We have had licensed bookmakers in the UK for 65 years. Okay. Now, to have a license, you have to cooperate with the authorities. You have to have a money trail. You have to flag up any suspicious betting patterns. Now, cricket is a sport that is plagued by corruption, because there is a vast black market in the Indian subcontinent controlled by gangs, and there's been all manner of controversies. Really, like on a sort of 3-monthly basis, there's another big controversy about some player trying to fix a match and having it banned, or a franchise. None of that activity, as far as I know, or as far as it's ever made the press, has taken place in a licensed jurisdiction. This is taking place underground in back streets. Right now, again, were we to do this with politics, the political betting world is going on as it is. I mean, let me just tell you a brief history of how this has developed over the years. So, we had the most sophisticated, liberalised betting industry in the world. We've had licensed firms since 57, and pretty soon after that, we were betting on elections. Now,
sorry, since 1957, is that what you said?
1957 was when licensed betting shops came into being, and by say 1962, there was political betting on some level, on the Conservative Party leader or on the general election. Now, this century, that has exploded with the creation of Betfair and other betting exchanges. So, now it's a kind of, these exchanges are peer-to-peer, they're like stock market, so you can get a real-time prediction or a percentage for each candidate, right? Now, the liquidity in those markets has gone crazy. I mean, it rose sixfold from 2012 election to 2016 election. In 2016, first the Brexit referendum and then the Trump versus Clinton became the biggest ever betting market on Betfair, right? By 2020, it had risen eightfold again, 1.7 billion traded on Trump v Biden. Never mind all the side markets, and that's just with one firm. That's just one single firm, 1.7 billion traded. Now, obviously, this is anonymous, right? The accounts are anonymous. Who knows who places what bet? I am absolutely certain that a lot of that liquidity is money coming in from around the world, from the offshore bookies laying off their position, from gamblers coming in to trade in our markets. So it's going on. It's going on whether, it's going on in a lot, but only one country is reaping the rewards from having a licensed industry.
Should it be more transparent? I mean, should you be able to see who's betting? I mean, it seems like it might be able to prevent some of the kind of scandals like the London mayor candidate that you were talking about. If you could point and say, this is the person, this is his campaign manager is the one, blowing up his stock price.
Well, no, I don't think that. I think it would. I think gamblers need an element of anonymity, right? And I wouldn't want to. I think it would kill the market somewhat if people had to. You could see exactly who was placing what bet. But the issue is, if an election watchdog, if the police, even the press, flagged up suspicious betting patterns, then a firm like Betfair or Smarkets or any other or Ladbrokes, I'm 100% sure they would cooperate with the authorities and provide the money trail. In the few instances where we have had of corruption in sports, those licensed firms will always cooperate with the authorities, and you'd see it. And I mean, this is leaving aside the point that I don't think politics is really even the same as sports in those regards, because yes, you can fix a cricket match, you can fix a tennis match, right? So there is scope for that. You can't fix an election through betting on it. It's just not possible. What are you going to do? Get 12 million?
I'm going to clip this and save it, because I just think wherever there's a lot of money at stake, when you're talking about whether it's defense contracts or, infrastructure money or whatever, whenever there's money at stake, people will find a way. And Americans especially can't do anything a little bit, right? We're going to take it and it's going to be on tilt. Like, if you introduced this somewhere, and let's say like they started someplace small, like Rhode Island, okay, and they say, okay, we're gonna have some political betting here and just sort of see how it works. That, I think, might be the way in. By the way, I think, the chances of it being sort of a blanket thing in the U.S. are pretty slim. You need to probably try it out. But I just feel like wherever you can take something and go nuts with it, like the dark money that comes into political campaigns, that's all pursuant to a specific provision that was supposed to be to allow community groups to contribute to campaigns. And now it has swallowed the whole thing. And so there are so many unintended consequences whenever we sort of talk about money in politics that I am worried that while it might not seem possible now, that the very, very crafty American investors or contributors will find a way to muck this up. And it is different from sports in the sense that sports teams don't have armies and they can't levy taxes on people. I mean, something that really affects people's lives. And I think the disillusionment, further disillusionment, because we're already kind of there, but further disillusionment has serious consequences in a way that even, God love whatever sport you're into, it doesn't impact it in the same way.
Well, I guess, I mean, of course, as the London Mayor incident does show, people will find a way. They will find an angle. They will look for an angle. I guess the point is that it's going on already. This is the point. It's a really rapidly growing thing. We have licensed firms here. Australia has licensed betting firms as well. Lots and lots of offshore firms. Never mind whatever is going on in individual states that I don't know about, but I don't know. I mean, there are ways and means of getting a bet on. I've never had a problem finding someone to take a bet.
Patrick, what do you think the chances are? Because that Supreme Court case you talked about did not say sports betting can't be banned. It said Congress can regulate sports betting, but they can't ban it. So it does leave the door open for sort of a national regulatory scheme. Is that something you're concerned about, or maybe even looking forward to?
Not that I'm looking forward to. And I want to make one point to your question to Paul about, I think with the London Mayor thing, as far as anonymity and so forth, just to back up just 1 second, I think Paul's spot on that. The bettors, generally speaking, the consumer wants anonymity. And why I don't think that's a problem is because bettors will sharpen the market. If something interesting is going on and somebody's dumping a bunch of money on a candidate to try and make that candidate appear more viable, well, eventually the odds are going to move to the point where there's going to be buyback on the other candidate or the other candidates, plural, possibly. The bettors sharpen the market, and the bettors know. I mean, especially the ones who really pay attention to this. Somebody like Paul, people who do this for a living, professional bettors, whether they're in sports or politics or whatever, they're going to help odds makers sharpen that number. And odds makers know what they can and where they kind of know where they need to be as they manage the market. It's much more of a private thing, which to a degree dovetails into your question, Melissa. I don't think that in just the way the United States is set up, it's a different setup than the way the UK is set up. And I feel like because the United States with 50 mini democracies, in the way it's set up, is different, and therefore I don't think a complete federal oversight of state by state betting. I don't think that's something that necessarily is desired. It is something that will happen if the sports betting industry here in the United States doesn't police itself well. As if it is getting, if there's 9 million commercials and people are sick of that, if there are other things about the industry that are unappealing that draw the ire or attention of enough people or enough legislators and regulators, then yes, I think this kicks up to a federal level, and I understand why it would. I think what is ideal for the sportsbook industry is to, be very well in compliance with state regulators, most of whom have got most of whom are very good and have quickly adapted and got good setups. New Jersey is phenomenal. Nevada has a fantastic regulatory board and a long record. I think ideally what they would like to do is maybe they need some federal assistance or federal input, but I don't think what the industry wants for both consumers and providers, operators, is complete federal oversight of this.
Well, would it make things easier though? I mean, I wonder if having a different sort of setup in each state causes issues in terms of intrastate betting and movement of funds and betting on races in other states. Is that or events? I guess you would say
Right,
in other states.
right. Oh, I'm sure there are some positives and negatives that you could parse out on both sides of that. Look, the ability to shop in another state for better odds than what you're getting in your state, that's kind of interesting. But that's kind of part of the thing too, with the way it's going right now, and state by state adopting these things. There are some strong regional biases showing up in sports betting. Like, for example, in New York, people are betting on the Giants and the Jets, even if the Giants and the Jets aren't necessarily good. The Giants are okay this year. The Jets are very typical. But they're still commanding that loyalty from the customer, from their local bias creeps in, and it impacts how games are bet and how things are done. Politics is a little bit different, especially national politics. But it's a good question, and it's probably something we'll parse out more as we talk more in the coming weeks and months and so on. There's a lot of ways to look at this, but my opinion is that the softest touch possible, while keeping it above board, legal, regulated tax protections for the consumers, protections for the operators, and so forth, is hopefully the best way forward here.
Well, so we just actually got some news, going in the other direction when it looks like the predictive market PredictIt, which had been sort of tacitly been given approval to operate in the U.S. With sort of yes/no questions, which allowed it to be more like a stock market than sort of a betting market, I think, got a letter saying they need to shut down, that they haven't been complying with some of the restrictions that had allowed it to continue to operate. Are you guys familiar with this? It just happened in August. I think they got the letter saying they were going to shut down.
I think it's a really depressing and terrible development, really. I think PredictIt was almost a model firm. I thought there were limits on how much you could play in each market. So really the argument about it corrupting elections or integrity weren't a factor at all, because the limits were so small. And what PredictIt managed to do was, I think they enhanced the political conversation. They enhanced the analysis of races. There's a whole community around PredictIt of really sharp traders many of whom work in and around politics, know about politics, people who just want to talk about it. And I think that they were really adding something to the conversation, and as far as I can see, as someone who, obviously I don't have a PredictIt account because I'm in the UK, but I know a lot of the guys who play on that, and I follow the markets every day. I think it's really a tragedy for them. It really is. I don't think that they were doing any harm. And I just think, it wasn't affecting the integrity of politics. And also, I just wonder, why is politics treated so differently to any other form of trading? Right? I mean, we can bet on the stock market, right? That's gambling. Any other form of trading is gambling. But why is it when I want to have a bet on who the Democrat nominee is in Louisiana that there's something wrong with that?
Well, it just seems like there's been a swing to a more conservative way of looking at this. I think PredictIt started out as a social science tool just to kind of see what people would do with small amounts of money, and now even that is, I think, supposed to be out of business by February. But look, I'm not sold on it being legal in the U.S., but I'm not necessarily against it. I can be convinced. But one of the things that I really love about political betting is that it forces people to sort of put their money where their mouth is. So they can't just say so-and-so is going to win. They actually could win or lose money on it. And for that reason, my thought, or I think the inclination is to think that these are going to be more accurate than other kinds of polls and analyses. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is a group of Senate races. As we know, the midterms are coming. Control of the Senate is in the balance, and we've got about 6 Senate races that are very, very close, too close to call necessarily. But there's some interesting issues between what an aggregator like, say, 538 says about these races and what the betting lines say about these races. So, Paul, you want to give us the rundown of what this group of states' status is with regard to betting versus polling?
Yeah, I do. So, first of all, let's just deal with the big market, which is who will control the Senate. So, in short, I mean, the odds on the Republicans gaining the Senate majority at this point in time, that is equivalent to a 41% chance on Betfair, whereas 538 only rate it at 34%. Now, if we go through state by state, we'll see a lot of really significant differentials. So just dealing with the 8 most interesting races, I don't think anyone's really expecting any upsets outside these 8. So in Arizona, on Betfair, the Democrats are rated 73% likely to win, whereas 538 give Democrats an 82% chance. In Florida, the Republicans are 84% in the betting, 82% on 538. In Georgia, pivotal state, it's actually the other way around. The betting gives the Democrats a 60% chance, and 538 gives it a 54% chance. In North Carolina, the Republicans are 78% on the betting lines and 68% with 538. In Nevada, critical state, which we'll talk about, big differential here, 66% likely a Republican victory on Betfair, but 538 only gives the Republicans a 48% chance. In Ohio, the Betfair line is 71%, so the Republicans, 538 rate is 78% likely. Pennsylvania, another significant difference. The betting line here gives the Democrats, John Fetterman, a 63% chance. 538 think he's got a much better chance at 72%. And finally, Wisconsin, not much difference. General agreement. Betfair say 70%, 538 say 67%. So some big differentials, really big differentials there. Most notably Nevada, which I think is a perfect time to go over to Patrick, who is in Nevada. So what can you tell us, Patrick?
Well, and I'm looking at PredictIt, and I'm with you on PredictIt. I think it's, I've only familiarized myself with it recently. I mean, I was aware of it, but I hadn't really looked at it a lot until we started getting into the planning stages for this Get Out the Bet podcast. And it's fascinating. And Melissa, backing up just a moment, it kind of speaks to my point about, the regulatory state imposing its will on this, where really, as Paul pointed out, this is not impacting integrity, and in fact, it's a very smart operation that is really useful and makes a contribution in certainly a more positive than negative way. But in looking at PredictIt right now, it's showing for Senate Laxalt at 50. The price is 59 cents. Paul, can I equate that then, if I'm doing it right, that's basically a 59% chance? Is that what it's saying?
Basically, I mean, perhaps like the two numbers might equate to 102%, so it'd be 1%.
Sure. So the lean is that way, and I think there, as we discussed pre-show, Melissa, probably a couple of reasons for that, but really, I think the overriding factor right now is the economy and how things have gone the last couple of years in Nevada with regard to the pandemic and so forth, and then kind of the rebound from that. And where Nevada sits now in relation to where other states are at with regard to the economics part of it, and I think that's a little bit of a weight on the incumbent at this point, and it may equally be a weight for the governor's race and other races as well. But obviously the Senate's what we're hitting on here, and obviously that's the key. That's something that everybody's really dialed in on, and rightly so. So. That's the situation. That's the view from Las Vegas, if you will.
Well, I saw a couple of other things that are on this ballot, unrelated to the Senate race, but certainly could be related to turnout. And one was the proposal to go to open primaries with a ranked choice voting. And I saw Nevada is a closed primary state, which I don't know why, but I found surprising. But people who don't like political parties, and that's about a third of folks in Nevada, as it tends to be throughout the U.S., about a third of the people there are effectively shut out of your primary system. And so there's probably a decent amount of independent support for this ballot measure that the current incumbent, Senator Cortez Masto, has come out against. And so sort of aligning herself with sort of the political party status quo very publicly and against something that a lot of independents like could be a liability. The other thing that I saw on the ballots were big school board races, both in Clark County and I think it's Washoe County, where you basically have Tahoe, Reno. The biggest two counties are having contentious school board races. Washoe has also got commissioners races that are really turning into kind of culture wars and whether or not and how to count ballots and things like that, which can also really motivate groups of people to come out who wouldn't necessarily be in favor of the Democratic incumbent. Is your sense of things that people are really fired up about those non-Senate races?
I think they are just to a certain extent, yes. So I think you're going to see, however this ends up rolling, we've got basically a month to go, and as we all know, there's October surprises and so forth, and a lot can happen in 30 days time. And I do think even with early voting and so forth, the bulk of the turnout's going to be, either late in the early voting or on election day itself. So a lot can change between now and then, but there's no doubt that there'll be, potentially a significant trickle down effect on the ballot based on whoever you're penciling in at the top of the ballot. And I assume that, in that case, and here in Nevada, that'll be the Senate races, the House races, and then the governorship, of course. So, and then as well as some other larger statewide seats as well. And then to your point, Melissa, school boards and so forth. It's definitely contentious. So, but look, contentious is good. You want people motivated. You want them knowledgeable out there, taking in all this. And it's just another reason why I feel like political betting is another method by which that happens. People are going to be more informed if they're putting a few bucks behind their bet. I'm not saying do anything reckless. I'm not saying be irresponsible any more than I would say to be irresponsible with sports betting or any other type of gambling or trading, as Paul pointed out, with the stock market. I'm just saying that I do think it's something that it's a great avenue by which to discuss politics in a much less often, I think, in a much less disruptive way and in a much less divisive way. People talk about, bet on one sports team or the other. Hey, you're on the other side. I want to win my bet. No harm, no foul if you win yours. I feel like politics would be the same way. There's just so much divisiveness. And I think betting on this is a better way it's a great talking point to not be so divisive about it. But I'm certainly going off the rails there.
Is it your sense that the betting percentage is the more accurate one? Is it your sense that the polls are underestimating the Republican in this race?
It is my modest sense, yes, but just generally speaking, whether it's sports betting or political betting, and I'll kick this over to Paul because I think he can certainly speak to this very effectively. But it is my sense that in covering the sports betting space for many years, and also having some of the background on the journalism side in politics and legal and elections and regulation and so forth, it is my sense that I feel like sports betting markets are sharper than polling markets. So, but I'm going to defer to Paul because I think he could really speak well to that.
I would say the jury is out. I think that right now there's definitely and understandably a consensus building that there is such a thing as a shy Trump voter, right? And I think you can definitely see that in the 2020 result in certain places, and you can see it in 2016 in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania in particular. However, I would warn against a classic mistake that political bettors make, which is refighting the last election and looking at all of the rules that applied then will apply now. Because number one, pollsters will change their method in between. And secondly, each election is a unique entity in its own right, and the factors that drove it will not apply next time. And usually when the polls have been wrong, the explanation is differential turnout. One side is more motivated than the other. Now, my view here is that, yes, definitely, Donald Trump attracts a particular section of people who maybe aren't as likely to vote otherwise, right, and are ultra motivated to turn out for him. Whether that applies to the Republicans is another matter, because if you take the 2018 elections, big turnout on both sides, polls were bang on, absolutely bang on, right? And likewise, in the UK, we've had this conversation where people say there are such things as shy Tories, and in one election it seems to apply, but then the next election it flips around the other way and there's shy left-wing voters. Or not shy, it's not shy left-wing voters, it's just their enthusiasm has been understated, right? So I do think the jury is out, but I think there's a good case to be made, for example, in a state like Wisconsin. I mean, now the betting is very one-sided towards Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, but earlier in the piece it was almost 50-50, and I always felt that was wrong. That was just too much initial enthusiasm for Mandela Barnes. My general feeling on this is that I've got more faith than the markets have in the 538 forecast. I don't think they're going to be wildly wrong. I think if you're in a situation where it's 60-40 either way, then that could flip. But if you look through those races, the only two that are less than 60% to one side are Georgia and Nevada. And to me, that's what it all boils down to. I do think the Democrats will win Pennsylvania. I think Fetterman will win, and I think that Mark Kelly will win in Arizona. So to gain Senate control, the Republicans are going to need Georgia and Nevada. Now, we discussed Nevada. That's probably right. Georgia, we've just seen an October surprise. Right?
Yes, we have.
So I'm from Georgia. I was born and raised there, and I can't tell you how weird it is to see Herschel Walker, who is such a beloved figure, such a revered figure. Comes from a small town in Georgia, plays at UGA, Heisman Trophy winner. Everybody loves him. In my formative experience, to see him running for Senate, it's really bananas. But I'll tell you, he does start with such a good name recognition, so much love for him, that even though there have been lots of unfortunate things that have been trickling out over the past several weeks, I think, you really can't necessarily count him out. The people in Georgia, like I said, when I was growing up, it was a very big deal. Herschel Walker was the one thing everyone could agree on. So even though, they show him as a tie, and I think Raphael Warnock has a really good chance of winning, and I think historically, if you look at Warnock winning his seat to begin with, and you look at John Ossoff winning his seat, it does seem like these Senate races keep going toward Democrats. Plus, we have some recent information about Herschel Walker that just came out about the potentially. I mean, he denies it, but there is a canceled check, I think, and some other evidence that he did pay for someone's abortion at some point, and so. But it comes out, and everyone says, "Oh, this is it." The Herschel Walker is over, and then the Republican Party of Georgia says it's their biggest fundraising day so far. They've taken almost $200,000 in contributions for his campaign. So. Sometimes up is down. You can't really tell how voters are going to accept certain information that you just were sure was going to end somebody's campaign. So, Georgia, I think, continues to be kind of a nail biter for that reason. I'll just add one other thing that I think is sort of in Herschel Walker's favor, even though he looks like he's slipping a bit in the polls. There is a ballot measure on the ballot in Georgia that would allow for property owners it would allow local governments to give property owners a break on local property taxes if there has been a disaster. And so technically it has to do with with a tornado that hit Coweta County, and that's the person who proposed this change. But if you remember Hurricane Michael from 2018, which swept through the entirety basically of southern Georgia, which is almost entirely Republican, right? Most of the Democrats in Georgia are up north in the Atlanta and suburban areas. Can't talk. And so if you look at the southern part, who's going to be really interested potentially in this tax break ballot measure, that could also be something that helps to get people to turn out and vote in areas that are not necessarily Raphael Warnock strongholds. And so that's another just sort of below the radar thing that might actually be helpful for the Walker campaign.
And what do you think about the potential for, splitting between the governor and Senate race, where, generally agreed Brian Kemp's going to win quite easily? Okay.
Right. I mean, that's what we're asking people to do, right? It's like to vote for Brian Kemp and then to Raphael Warnock, or not vote at all, or vote for the Libertarian candidate, and who's also in the race. And that's another place that could potentially pull votes, away from Walker. But look, split voting happens. It's not hugely common. There's always a drop off whenever you're asking people to literally shift over a few inches on the ballot. But that's also another problem. I mean, Brian Kemp definitely sort of brings Walker up. Conversely, Walker maybe bringing Kemp down a bit. We'll have to keep our eyes on that race as well. But it's something you also see in Pennsylvania, where the Democrat is doing very well, and for governor is doing very well. And so essentially, Dr. Oz has to kind of convince people to split that vote for him, and that's always a little. Again, you're still going to capture some votes, but it's not a 1-for-1 as people. It's not as clean as folks would like to see.
I do think Georgia is really the interesting race. I mean, not only is it probably the state that will determine the Senate, but I mean, just the fact that Herschel Walker has that level of fame and that kind of scandal coming out, that is, that's a huge October surprise, right? It's reminiscent of the Access Hollywood tapes in 2016. We all know how that turned out, right?
Didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter. But then I'm also inclined to say, is Herschel Walker Donald Trump? Does he have that particular, it's a great known unknown a month out.
Well, I mean, we also have the other issue with Stacey Abrams, of course, is running against Brian Kemp for governor, and she's been making a lot of hay with the issue of abortion. Georgia passed under Governor Brian Kemp an abortion law in 2019 that didn't take effect until just earlier this year because of the Dobbs decision. So now it's in effect. It's pretty restrictive. It's a heartbeat bill, and that has given Stacey Abrams something really important to bang the drum about. As she campaigns in Georgia, and so whether or not that's something that will help to drive Warnock supporters and other folks who don't vote Republican or who are angry at the Republicans for what they've done here. And the abortion scandal, if nothing else, it sort of ties Walker to this issue and brings this word into everyday political conversation and really keeps it top of mind for everybody in Georgia who's listening to the news. So for better or worse, it might actually be helping the Democrats, not necessarily by turning Republicans away from Walker, but by motivating them and reminding them that this issue is kind of on the ballot.
And of course, because this is such a huge national issue, Walker is a huge celebrity. It brings it to the centre of the national conversation. And, Democrats need that badly. They need abortion under discussion. We've seen in recent months that their chances have improved significantly, in special elections, in House races, because women voters are better motivated to turn out. And the whole key to the Democrats having any hope of keeping the House, let alone these Senate races, is turnout. They've got to get their voters out in ways they haven't done in most midterms in the past.
That's right. And well, so Patrick, we've got the difference between the betting line, which is 60%, and the M538, which is 54%. Looks like the gambling crew seems to be more confident that um, that Raphael Warnock is going to win that race in Georgia. What do you make of that? Of that sort of delta? They seem to be a little more clear on who that's going to be, and of course it can change every day. But what do you make of that difference?
Well, I think and Paul has probably looked at this more closely than I have, but that's there's been a shift in just the last couple of days, right, Paul? With all of this coming down, there's been some movement, not necessarily a flip, but certainly a move.
Mm.
Um, Look, there's no question you don't want to be on the other end of it, on the wrong end of an October surprise. So I don't doubt that. Honestly, both those numbers leaning, I would say they both lean. I don't think it's anything heavy, but they both certainly lean toward Warnock, and I get that, and that may be the case. And as you said, Melissa, it may splitting votes doesn't happen often, but maybe this is one instance where people are doing a little back and forth on the Georgia ballot. I know my opinion is, 30 some days to go, that the economy is the issue almost everywhere. And we'll see how people vote based on, I think more people are going to vote based on that than on the abortion issue. But that's kind of my broad perspective, state to state, county to county, in lower, in down ballot races and so forth, or districts, etc. It can be very different, and Georgia could be very different because of this. I do still think the overriding issue is the economy, and I think if you look at a fair amount of polling from a lot of operations that are, some are straight down the middle and some are perceived as being more left and some are perceived as being more right. But if you look at the ones that perhaps are perceived as more down the middle, there are issues, either the economy itself or issues that are directly or tangentially tied to the economy, that are higher on people's lists than some of the other issues. So we'll see how it plays out. But Georgia could be very different, as you alluded to, Melissa, and as Paul, as you alluded to. I'm talking in broad terms.
Well, my husband's favorite holiday is Christmas. My favorite holiday is October in an election year, because this is when all the surprises come. This is if you've got money and you've been waiting to spend it on a race and you've got a big juicy piece of information, now's the time to drop it. Both in Nevada and Georgia, early voting is going to be starting here in about 2 weeks, October 17th, October 22nd, and so it's time to get out there and taint the water. If you are somebody who's got an interest and a bunch of money sitting around to spend on the race. So the next few weeks are going to be absolutely critical. Everything, all the secrets that you've been holding on to are going to drop. Any canceled check for an abortion from many years ago, that's the kind of thing that's going to come out here in the next few weeks. So that's a very exciting time. It's a really cool time to be watching these. And of course, the numbers are going to keep changing, but it's important to keep both numbers in mind, as Paul alluded to, as we go forward. So before we wrap up this week, so my take of the week is this is the absolutely best season we are getting into here. I'm excited to come back next week and talk about some additional races. What about you guys, Paul? What's your hot take of the week?
Well, it's kind of flipped today, because I thought that the Walker scandal was almost a decisive blow that I think the Democrats will keep the Senate. And my position, the only big position I have, is on Betfair on the Democrats to win 50, 51 or 52 seats, which I think is underestimated on their particular market. But big negative today. Big negative has hit that mindset today, which is Saudi Arabia dramatically cutting oil production. So oil prices, gas prices are likely to fly back up in the next few weeks. And Biden's approval had been steadily on the up for a month, 2 months, could well fall back down again now. So that could be the alternative game changer. But I'm still sticking with that position.
Well, yeah, I was talking to a political consultant the other day about potential for a California race flipping, and he said, if you're going to flip if anybody's going to vote Republican, what you need is, in California at least, is $7 gas. And we might actually get there, and it'll get, similarly ugly in other places, which would certainly help the party not currently in power. All right, Patrick, what about you?
Well, and to your point, I mean, midterms are always a tricky dance for uh, the executive branch that's in power. I mean, it's not unusual for the presidency and really the House is obviously in Democrat hands as well, and then you've got the split in the Senate for the opposite side, no matter who, Republican, Democrat, what have you, to pick up some seats and make some gains in the midterms. So I wouldn't really be surprised by anything at this point. It is something that's just as Paul alluded to with some of these numbers, it's very, very close. And 60-40, even like maybe it sounds like a lot, but it's not much. It doesn't take much to flip a 60-40. It's a relatively modest favorite. And if you're talking about betting action, when a game is being bet 60-40, it's really considered two-way action. Anything in that range, 55-45, it's two-way action. A fumble, if you will, a political fumble of any sort, political turnover can easily flip those numbers. So, and 30 days is a long time in this space. Honestly, as we're learning, 24 to 36 hours is a long time in this space. A lot can happen in that time. So, I don't know what my hot take is. I can't argue with, especially with Paul's experience, but also with what he's betting off of that experience. He's much more experienced in doing this than I am, which is why it's great to have him on. I just think the hot take is it's going to be a hot month, even if the weather is getting colder over the next 30 days. Things are going to really heat up.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for being on the podcast today. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to send us your questions at the link we're going to give you in the show notes, and also through Twitter accounts for Paul and Patrick. As a reminder, betting on politics is not permitted in the U.S., and it's also only legal in certain places in Europe, so be careful. This podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage any gamblers out there to check out a variety of sources. Thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you next week.